want to do today is to do some stuff on the parsha and then some stuff on Pesach. Okay, on the Seder. A small amount on both or big amount, I don't know. See how we get there. So let's start with the parsha. What's this week's parsha? Excellent, ladies. Nice. What a great start to this year. I'll give you a clue. Tazria. How's that? Okay. So tazria, the beginning of tazria is quite a. I mean, there's quite a lot of stuff in the beginning of tazria, but it's really the beginning of tazria is about birth, childbirth, and Shuma that comes with childbirth, with Mila, things like that. Okay, I want to move out of that for the moment because there's a lot to speak about that, but we're not going to do that now. What I want to do, look at the next. I want to go is the beginning of Yud Gimel. So we look at the beginning of Yud Gimel, and I'm actually not going to focus on Yud Gimel. I mean on the beginning. I'm going to go down because you'll see where we're going. But so Moshe says, so Hashem says to Moshe and to Aaron, he says, Adam that if a person has different types of like things, lesions, they call them in English. I don't know what a lesion is, but they had different types of sores of something, and each one of them is defined. What's important for us to remember is that the Torah, I never understood this until this morning, so I'm quite into this right now. So the Soloveitchik says that halacha is defined by there's the thing that you have to do, and you don't really know what that thing is because the Torah doesn't spell things out. Okay, the Torah doesn't. The Torah is even in the sukkah, right? What's the sukkah supposed to look like? No one knows. Until you look into Torah Shabbal Peh, Torah Shabbal Peh gives you the understanding of what a sukkah is. So, but it's with everything. You're supposed to have tefillin. You don't know what those are. You're supposed to, the 39 malachot. No, you have to search for what these things really are. Because the way the Torah works, the Torah gives a introductory space to it, and then Chazal defines it. And it's in the definition, which are all measurable, all mathematical. That's the chap, right? That you can start to measure whether or not you've done that which you need to do. So you can have a thing that you call tefillin that have got 6 sides, but they're not tefillin. You might call them tefillin, whatever you want, right? You can have it's much more difficult. Let's take the Seder as an example. You can have a thing called matzah. If you call matzah, because it's matzah, we don't know what matzah really is. Okay, it's bread, okay, of some sort, and you can. And how much are you supposed to eat? You don't know. It doesn't tell us how much you're supposed to eat. But there's a definition of how much eating it. We're going to get into that there. Okay? So the Torah gives all these descriptions of things, but in the description is a very detailed, or underlying that description is a very detailed understanding of what it is. Okay? And that's where we often get caught up, is in the detail. And the Gemara will bring the detail. But we want to move a little bit out of the detail and really try and understand a little more concept. Okay, for now, because thank God, at least according to the Ramban, you don't have to worry about Torah outside of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so since you don't have to worry about Torah outside of Eretz Yisrael, we're not going to worry about that. So if you've got a little bit of a sore, don't worry, go to the doctor. Okay, you don't have to go to the court. Okay, so if I want you to look at the pasuk Mem Zayin, which is 47. So it's right at the end of all the discussions of what a person should or shouldn't have, etc. Then the pasuk says, what about, it's all very nice if it's on a person, okay? But what happens if that same thing comes onto clothing? So you've got all these different lesions that mean different things. You've got to go to different places in different ways. But if you have that on clothing, now the minute it goes onto clothing, it means that there's something that is not normal. Because clothes don't get sick. They may get old, they may get too small, too big, depending. I'll go into that, okay? But they don't get sick. If that's the case, what does it mean that if the beged has some type of tzarat affliction, nega tzarat, the beged, the tzemer of the beged pishtim, whether it's on it's wool or it's flax, and then it goes explaining where it would be on the walk, whatever the case. This is all different places. The Torah describes it. So it's on that I want to share this Ramban with you. I think this Ramban is an important Ramban. The Ramban says that when it's on the garment, it's proof. It's a proof. What? She'einenu b'teva klal. That is not natural. It's not an illness. It's not something. Why would your garments get a thing on it? You wear your garments every day. So there's something that's abnormal about it. Okay? And it's also something that's never existed before. It's not something that existed and for some reason that's kind of connected to the garment, something new. It says also later on we'll learn about the fact that there are houses that get afflicted with tzara. Why would your house get afflicted? So you say, well, it's like there's damp. So it's, what do you call it? All those spores. Like in fact, it's like moss kind of, like in the shower, like you'll see, I don't think the shower problems, all that black stuff, right? Mildew, right? So not mildew, right? Because mildew, you know why it's there. So you can't say, oh, look, my shower there, it must be I'm talking Lashon Hara. Okay? Could be that you're singing in the shower and you should be cleaning in the shower. That's a different discussion. But right? When Am Yisrael are like complete with Hashem, and then what? When we are shleimim with Hashem, then the expression is through our bodies, through our clothes, and through our house. They should present a positive, a beautiful way of looking. Okay, so the fact that there's something wrong with the clothes or the houses means that we're not shleimim with Hashem, which is just interesting, by the way, in and of itself. The Rambam brings that the Talmud Chacham should not walk around with like an oil spot on his clothes. And I was just thinking about that now when I was doing it, looking at it, is that if one does that, then one is presenting an image which is not shleimim with Hashem. Which is an idea. Okay, let's get that. Okay, then it says, that when there is some type of sin or some type of incorrect behavior, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings this affliction to do what? To show that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's complete name has removed itself, which has allowed a negative spirituality in, which is then is expressing itself in this sapachat, in this lesion of some sort. Okay, he says, and it only exists in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Why is it only in Eretz Yisrael? Why do you think? He said, because this is the chosen place where the Hashem's honorable name lives within the land of Israel. So therefore, if there is some type of damage in the integrity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name in Eretz Yisrael, then it will reflect on our physicality, our physical things that we do in some way or another. Okay, so that's the number one understanding. The number one, it's an unnatural thing that it just happens, and it will only happen in Eretz Yisrael. Now, if we carry on and we see that the Rambam says that what is Tzara'at all about? The Rambam's got a whole ganze spiel on Tzara'at, and I want to go through it with you because we know about Tzara'at in different places. Where are we first met with Tzara'at? Go back a little bit, not too much, but yes, Miriam, but go back a little bit. How does Moshe know that Miriam had Sarah? But how does he know that? Moshe is introduced to Torah. Where? Remember, he puts his hand into his garment and he pulls it out. That's Torah. That's the first time we are introduced to the concept of Torah. Okay? Why? Because of Lashon Hara. We have to unpack that a little bit more. Says the Rambam. Let me do it in English. Yeah. Torah is a collective term. Okay? And it's a collective term for all different types of lesions that are not similar to each other. They're all different. Each one of them is a different lesion for different reasons, right? Because, for example, the one where it's got white is called tzaraat, and then when it's like a little bit indented, it's called something else. Each one of them is called different things. Okay. And then he says we need to understand that the Torah calls it tzaraat. What is it? It's a sign to the Jewish people. The Rambam tells us. Not everybody tells us that, by the way. It's not clear. The Torah doesn't say that you speak Lashon Hara, then you get Torah. Okay? It's a page, it's a commentary. So the Rambam says you get it because you speak Lashon Hara. Why is it such a big thing? Why do you get tzaraat if you speak Lashon Hara? What have you done? So what happens? What's the process of tzaraat? Although the Torah presents it as in the body and then in your clothes and in the house, the actual process is the other way around. Okay, it's the house, the body, the clothes, the clothes, the body. Always Hashem gets the further and then claps you going backwards. I remember Rabbi Lapham telling us, if Rabbeinu Yonah says, if you break a dish at home, just think about it. Don't think about the dish. It's irrelevant. Think about why are you breaking the dish? Why is there a kapora required for you to have in your home? That's the idea. Not an easy thing to think about. You'll never ever forget that, I promise you now. I don't remember any other part of the shir except that sentence. Okay? Think about that. Something happens. Got to think about it. So he says, so what if it happens on the house and it stays in the house if you continue to do what you need to do and you don't do any Torah, right? Why? Because then what happens? Because then it moves on to your clothes and then moves on to your body. Why is all that? Because at the end of the day, you've got to separate yourself. The whole thing of Torah comes out. The end point of Torah, you have to separate yourself from everybody else. So you try to make everybody separate from that other person because you spoke about it. Now, what happens to you? You become the one that has to separate himself completely. And can you imagine the way it works? Like if it's on your house, that you like dismantle your house. On your clothes, you've got to get rid of the clothes. It's like quite hectic. It's quite embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed. Well, you should have done what you did with the other person. So that's something to bear in mind. Okay. Then he says, yeah. Remember, Hashem did something to Miriam. But remember what Miriam did. What did she do? She spoke about her brother. Remember, it's an unbelievable thing. Miriam, we forget, was the older sister. She's older than Moshe. Not only is she older than Moshe, she makes sure that she looked after Moshe. Right? She was confident on Moshe. She made sure she looked at him in the river. She's not like against Moshe. She's the older sister. Right? The way he grew up on her lap. And she put herself in danger to save him from the Nile. And she didn't even say anything wrong. I don't know what she said. What did she say? What was so wrong with what she said? The only thing she said, he's just like us. Remember, it's the older sister. The older sister never sees the younger baby brother as anything more special than he really is. Okay? Just a nabi, just like all of us. And he didn't really care. He had no covered issues. Because it says, Ish Moshe Anav Ma'od, he was so humble. Papa PK, Miyad Mas, Ne'ensha, B'Tarat, immediately she gets punished with Tarat. So she does nothing, really, that's that bad. You think, well, he doesn't mind. And then she gets punished with Tarat. Kal V'chomer, Ibnei Adam, how much more so for us? Harisha'im V'hatipshim. Now, this is these words that Rambam says, it's quite hectic. I don't know about you, but I speak Lashon Hara every now and then. Okay? Happens. Yeah, I'll have to iron in Maskira Yom. Okay? But the Rambam defined people who speak Lashon Hara as a Risha'im, evil, and Tipshim. What's a tipay? Stupid. Shemarvim ladaber gedolos minimum. How much more so the people who are, so she uses great Neviah, she says nothing wrong. How much more so the fools and the evil ones who speak Lashon Hara. Leficha, therefore he says, Ra'ui lemi sherotzi lekaven orchotav lishrachek miyeshivatan miledaber imahem. He says the person who wants to grow, the person who wants to be a real human being should distance himself from anybody who speaks Lashon Hara, okay, and shouldn't speak to them at all. Kedei shelo yitpas adam bereshet rasham. You don't get caught in the net. Easy. It's so late when you're sitting and people are talking and then you just get caught. You don't want to, because we know we went to the shir, we have to speak Lashon Hara, right? We went to the Chofetz Chaim, and on Tisha B'Av we watch the Chofetz Chaim videos. We do all of these things that we know how bad it really is, but we sit down and it's so easy to get drawn. So easy. And that's the way the Rishonim work. They start with just talking rubbish. And that's why it says that the voice of the fool is just lots of words. That's a big thing, by the way. But people who speak Lashon Hara speak a lot. That's what the Rambam says. And you notice it. They speak a lot, not only about people, just a lot of stuff. When we talk kach, ba'in, the saper begrip tzaddikim. And because they start speaking just so much, eventually they start speaking about, they degrade even the great tzaddikim. Because they've got an opinion on everything. And that's what the Rambam is telling us. We have to be very careful about. Shneimar ta'almana, and then he quotes from a pasuk. And we talk kach, yelain hergel ledaber b'nevim. And if they can speak about the Nevi'im, and they can speak about all the great people, so you know what? I can speak about you and me without even thinking about it. And what happens is then we get caught out into all of that. And because they're speaking about us and they're speaking about the Nevi'im, then they start speaking about the way Rambam says, against HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Right? So really, we have to be very careful. And therefore he says, we have to, about Sichas Sheira Yisrael. So that's the bad stuff. Okay? But what are we supposed to be speaking about? Sichas Ksherei Yisrael, the word of those who are kosher amongst the Jewish people. Eina ela b'divrei Torah. Number one, obviously you got to say Torah. Okay? But not only that, the Chochmah. What's Chochmah? What does it mean? What does it mean? But it's more than being wise with your words. It says that they speak in wisdom. They speak about wisdom, which means they speak about things, important things, deep things. Chokhmah is, we understand Chokhmah as being the way the world runs, nature, not people, things, wisdom. The minute you start talking about people, you lose it, right? That's what he wants to say. So Ksheira Yisrael speak about Torah, obviously, and Chokhmah, the Fichach, Kadosh Baruch Hu Ozer Al Yadan Masakeh Otan Ba. That's why now Kadosh Baruch Hu is on your side. If we speak about Torah and we speak about things, and we speak about things that are important, then our Kadosh Baruch Hu comes and is on our side. Now it's fascinating, what? That this is the end of the Rambam's discussion on Torah. He's just given a whole Mussar shmuz. Not the Rambam. The Rambam is a halacha sefer, not a Mussar sefer. So here we can see that according to the Rambam, at least, this whole idea of Lashon Hara is not a halachic thing. Sorry, it's not a Mussar thing. It's not it's a real thing. It's halacha. In the same way as you got to do this, you got to, I don't know, light candles on Friday night, so you got to not speak Lashon Hara. And the same way you mustn't speak Rosh Hashanah, you got to speak about Torah and you got to speak about Chokhmah, which is really a very important thing. There's a Chaim Soloveitcher, the one now is a professor, brilliant. Soloveitcher, astounding. So he writes that his most beautiful moments are in museums. He goes there and he learns about things. We need to experience the world, learn about things, not learn about people. Because when we start with people, then we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. The Zohar says the following. Quite a crazy idea. The Zohar says, the Sefer Yetzirah, not the Zohar. The Sefer Yetzirah says that HaKadosh Baruch, how many letters are there in the alphabet? Well, are there 26? There's 22 because you've got to take away the 4 sofit, right? So there's 22 letters. So he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the 22 letters into a circle. There's a circle that keeps going, right? These 22 letters. That's the world runs according to the letters, because the letters are what the Torah is written. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. The world runs with these letters. And then he says, the way it works is that because it's like that, you've got Aleph, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Tet, etc., etc., etc. And the way it works is that there will always be this a combination of Ayin, Nun, Gimel. Ayin, Nun, Gimel. So it's, the way it works is that the Ayin, Nun, Gimel can either be at the top, or can go there, and it can be Ayin Nun Gimel at the bottom because of the circular nature of the thing. So what is Ayin Nun Gimel? Oneg, which means like Oneg Shabbos, enjoyment. Okay, but the same letters of Ayin Nun Gimel are also Nega. It's the same word. Nega and Oneg are the same word. It says the Sefer Yetzirah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world works as follows: you're either on the top in Oneg, or you're at the bottom in Nega. It's completely up to you. He can't determine that. We have to decide: are we enjoying the world in the way the world is supposed to be enjoyed through Torah and Chokhmah, or are we getting nega because we're at the bottom and we're not really getting what we need from it? It's our choice. And nega can be defined in all different ways. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to tell you about the parsha. Nice ideas. Let's move on. I want to now look really at something that struck me today, and I was looking into it, and I think I'm right. I hope I'm right. I'm going to tell you anyway, okay? Because I'm right. So, the Seder. Kadesh, Ruchat, Karpas, Ruchat, 15, there are 15 steps, we know that, okay? Karpas. Why do we have Karpas? So, I can understand Kiddush. I can understand washing my hands. Why do I understand washing my hands? Because we're about to start a process of learning Torah. The halacha is that before you start learning Torah or make a bracha or anything like that, you wash your hands. So maybe you could say that's just out of a safek, out of a doubt, that after Kiddush, I had my little run, maybe I scratched my head, I scratched under my arm, I don't know, scratched my thigh, and now I'm going to start the process of Torah, I'm going to wash my hands. So I can understand that. And when I wash my hands for those things, I don't make a bracha, that's the halacha. So I can understand that. But Kadesh Urchat, I should go immediately into the process of the Seder. And the process of the Seder is what? Yachat. Take the matzah, break it up, halach ma'anya, fantastic, and move on. Why does this karpas throw itself in the middle of everything? And why do we bring karpas? So the Gemara asks, not my question. The Gemara asks a question. So why do you think we have karpas for? And don't tell me to represent spring, okay? Because we spoke about spring, haven't we? All right, so it's not so simple spring. Okay, because we said that spring is not really spring. Aviv is not spring. Aviv is really the harvest festival. So Karpas does not represent the harvest festival. Okay, so what is Karpas? But what's it going to do with Seder? Well, I don't care. They can dip the vegetables until Mashiach comes. We wanted Mashiach, you got it. Right? You can dip the vegetables until Mashiach comes. It doesn't make a difference. What's it going to do with my Seder? Why do I need that so important that it's fundamental part of the Seder? Karpas. So the Gemara says, you know why? So that the children will ask. That the children will ask. What are they going to ask? why do you dip the karpas? And what are you going to answer then? In order that you'll ask. Because that's the Gemara says. Okay? So why is it so important then to ask? Now, and their asking now doesn't do anything for Masayla. All it does is that they'll ask. Because why? Because the way it works is that the process, right? Kadesh or Chatz, Karpas, Yachat, you break the little matzah. Then what do you do once you break the little matzah? Halach ma'anya. So halach ma'anya. Okay, and then what happens? And then they ask the 4 questions. Then it's manish tana. One question is 4 parts. You want to see it, all the different things. Okay? If somebody says, right, at that point, right, why are we having matzah now? Why don't we eat the matzah now? Because we normally we have matzah now after the Kiddush. Why haven't we done it? Then the truth is, according to the Mishnah and according to Halacha, that's it. Don't just say manish tana. Manish tana is part of like a structure to enable for those who can't ask questions on their own. Right? But if you ask the question, then you can just move on, theoretically. Try that at home, you'll get stunned. Right? But that's the whole thing. So why do we need this thing that the children are going to ask the question? And what is the answer that we're going to give them to this question? In order that you ask questions is not an answer. I just wanted to ask questions, move on. Okay. So the answer is because you've got to look at what's going on here. According to karpas, you tell me what you do for karpas, not what you eat. Each one's got their own emunah. Okay. In the early days of the Jewish of the Jews in America, when they discovered bananas, nobody knew what the bracha was on bananas, right? So it's recorded that they used to use bananas for karpas, in order to teach the children that the bracha that you make on bananas is Borei Pradama. Okay? Therefore, you see that karpas is an educative space. It is set out as an educative space. Okay, what do you do for karpas? You take your whatever, okay, it can be whatever you have, your potato, your celery, your parsley, whatever, and you tap and you dip it into salt water. And the way the Shulchan says you dip it into vinegar. So you salt water, I'm sure it's much nicer. Someone says, okay, use both sandwich vinegar. Right. So you dip it into vinegar, and then you make a bracha, and then you eat it. Right? And everybody says at that point, don't eat too much. You're not allowed to eat more than a kazayit. Correct? The Rambam says, now listen carefully. The Rambam says you must eat the kazayit. The Rambam says you must eat the kazayit. So if you take it and you dip it and you eat the kazayit. Why did he say you must eat the kazayit? Okay? Hold that. The Rosh, who is another one of the Rishonim, the Rosh says that when you take it, and you must eat less than a kazayit. And he explains why. Now listen carefully, because this is like an unbelievable thing. I think it's incredible. Like he says, you know why? Because and this whole thing of having in mind maror only comes from the Mishnah Berurah. Not so clear there. Okay. He says, I'll tell you why. Because there are 2 brachas that you make when we eat. So we know that we have in mind to eat for the maror, right? What's the bracha that you make on the karpas? Borei Pradama. Okay. What bracha do you make on the maror? I'll put you out of your misery. Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvah v'tzivanu ala chilak maror. It's a completely different bracha. There are 2 very, very different brachas. The one is a bracha on the thing, because you want to eat it. It's called the birkat nehenin, a bracha for having some type of benefit. And the other one is called the birkat mitzvah. It's not for the eating. It's for the mitzvah of eating. Okay? So, as I said right at the beginning, halacha defines by measurements. Says the Rosh that the mitzvah of eating maror, is there a mitzvah to eat karpas? A mitzvah? Or is it just part of the Seder? It seems to be it's just part of the Seder. It's not a mitzvah in and of itself, but it's part of the Seder. Whereas the maror, if you don't eat the maror, you haven't done the mitzvah. So there's a mitzvah to eat. There's a measurement for eating. According to halakha, when you eat, there has to be a certain amount you eat in order for it to be considered eating. So if, for example, a person is ill on Yom Kippur and they need to eat, so we say they need to eat in shiurim. What does that mean that you eat in shiurim? You eat less than a kazayat, or less than a ravit. You drink less than a ravit. It's always less than a certain amount, because that certain amount is what defines eating. Says the Rosh, there's no injunction in the mitzvah to eat the karpas. Therefore, eat less than a kazayat. Okay? But when it comes to maror, you've got to eat the kazayat, because if you don't eat the kazayat, so then you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Okay? Now that's an explanation now to give to somebody. So what? What's that got to do with anything? What are you teaching? Remember, the whole Seder is a teaching space. The whole Seder. It's easy to say, I'm doing a shir. I'm doing at the Seder. The kids are screaming, going on. Hard to teach. Okay? But the Seder is a teaching space. What are you teaching? What is the point of having the karpas at this point? We're going to go through a whole process. A whole process of eating, of teaching. We're asking the children to ask the question, why do we eat the karpas? You know why we eat the karpas? So that we're teaching you that when it comes later on to the eating of the matzah and maror, you have to eat a certain amount. And you always have to eat a certain amount when there's a mitzvah to eat it. You always have to do things in a certain way when there's a mitzvah to do that. But if you don't have the mitzvah, if it's just do it, so then you don't have a number. You don't have an amount. And that's very important for us to understand. In Yiddishkeit, there are two things. There are mitzvahs, and there's what's called reshut. Do you have to eat? Is there a mitzvah to eat? That's a question, right? As a rule, is there a mitzvah to eat? No, there's no mitzvah to eat. You don't have to eat. If you don't eat, you'll die. Okay? But if you don't have to eat. You're not told to eat. You're told to live. So however you live, that's what you have to do. But comes on a Shabbos, for example, there's a mitzvah to eat challah. So you have to have a certain amount in order to fulfill that mitzvah. You understand that? And everything we have, and that's the fundamental part of the Seder, is the understanding of the concept of mitzvah. Because if you don't have mitzvah, you don't understand mitzvah, then you don't have the concept of emunah in Hashem. You don't understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this world. We just had this incredible concept called Kiddush. We don't get it. Come, let's make Kiddush. But what does Kiddush mean? Why do we start the Seder with Kadesh? Why don't we start with Avadim Ayinu, and then go into Kiddush? Could do that. There's no reason you can't. I mean, there is a reason you can't, but there's no reason why you can't. Why do you have to start with Kiddush? Why is that the most fundamental thing? You tell me. Come on, ladies. Rack your brain. Just think about it. You start your Seder with Kiddush. Which is how you start every Yom Tov and every Shabbos. You start with Kiddush. And you can't do anything until you make Kiddush. You can't have a glass of water until you make Kiddush. From the time you lit candles until you make Kiddush. You can't have a glass of water. According to the strict opinion. I'm going to be strict to that. Okay? Well, why not? Because that's what makes us different. We've got to makadesh ourselves. We're about to start this incredible night. We start off with sanctifying ourselves. What does it mean? Kadoshim to you. We have to be kadosh. Why? Ki kadosh. And we want to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the founder on the night of the Seder, so we have to make Kiddush. But great, now I'm kadosh. Now I'm all sanctified and holy. What do I do? What do I do now to maintain that connection? I wash my hands. So now I've sanctified my physical body, but I still have to sanctify one more thing, and that's my mind. How do I sanctify my mind? By making a difference between a mitzvah and a reshut. There's an amazing Gemara. The Gemara speaks about Dama. Dama was this chap that he had. His father was a jeweler. He dealt in jewels, and they came and they needed a jewel for the. He was not Jewish. Not Jewish. That's important part of it. They needed a jewel to replace the damaged jewel on the kosher of the Kohen Gadol. So they come to Dama and they know his father's got the jewel. And they say to him, listen, can you just go call your dad? And he says, I can't call my father because he's sleeping. Okay, you know the story, I know the story, right? And eventually, and they offer him money. So he doesn't wake up his father. And eventually, his father wakes up. He sells the jewel to the base of Mikdash. Fantastic! They've got what they need, and he gets rewarded, right, with the para aduma. Okay, fantastic. And from there, we learn kibbut avad. What's the problem with that story? And therefore, he's got no mitzvah. He's got no mitzvah of kibbut avad. So no mitzvah. The Ten Commandments are ours, and no one else's. Oh, the fact that everybody thinks it's part of their religious canon is fantastic. It at least keeps people on the straight and narrow. But it's not theirs. The Torah was not given to the whites, that Waspi family down the road. It wasn't given to them, and it wasn't given to anybody else. It wasn't even the Chinese. It was given to us, only to us. Right? The fact that they've taken it's wonderful. Okay. So the Gemara there, the Tosfos there has a fundamental theological discussion, and his fundamental theological discussion is who's greater, the one who's commanded to do it and does it, or the one who does it because he just does it, he thinks it's the right thing to do. Why? Okay, go to that one, right? Why? Because you have the mitzvah to do it. Are you greater? Is that a greater act? And therefore what? Again? And therefore what? So I also want to do it. I also want to treat my parents nicely. And therefore, just go one step more. What happens if I wake up in the morning on the wrong side of the bed? Okay? And I actually don't really feel like putting on my twiddle. Happens every now and then, especially with a baby. Right? I don't really feel like doing it. But I do it anyway. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it because that's the mitzvah. The only reason we do things, we should do things, is not because it's good for us and it's positive for us and it's got all these spin-offs and Shabbos is beautiful to have the family around, all these things. The only reason we should do it is because of the mitzvah. You know why you don't eat more than a kazayit or karpas? Because there's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to eat. You've got to give it to kids, they like the potatoes, you fill them up before they get something. But there's no mitzvah. And because there's no mitzvah, I'm not going to eat it. Right? The Rambam seems to hold, therefore, that there is a mitzvah, therefore you would eat it. But according to the Rosh, which is what we pass in, we eat less than a kazayit. And in eating less than a kazayit, we teach the difference between mitzvah and doing what you want. I'm going to do what I want. Okay? And I'm not going to do the mitzvah. The kazayit is the size of an olive. It's not whatever. That size. Well, squished bread. You take a piece of challah and squish it. No, you don't have to go mad about it. But you have a little piece. Okay? And so I think that's such an important thing for us to understand. We're going to our Seder, that our Seder define the space in which we're supposed to be. And then we say, when we break the challah, we break the matzah, we pick up the matzah, then we start. This is the bread. And therefore we ask the questions. And when we ask the questions, then we start a new process of mitzvah. The mitzvah of Vigarat Lebincha. Now, until I understand that Vigarat Lebincha is a mitzvah, then I can fetch and complain that I haven't got the soup yet. But when I understand that it's a mitzvah, then I think of Dhamma, and I think, gee, he didn't wake up his dad because that was a mitzvah. I can maybe wait a little bit longer. I can push myself, I can stretch myself, I can make it work a little bit more. It's a mitzvah. That's all, just because it's a mitzvah. And I think that that's a thing that you guys are from a different generation, but I think we, in our generation, with our kids, but the biggest thing is, we don't want to push anyone too much. Don't make them uncomfortable. But mitzvah by definition is uncomfortable. Because I'm doing something not because I want to. I'm doing something because I've got to. Just a few thoughts that I had. Hope you enjoyed.